Pattern interrupt. All right, let's talk about a secret pattern in history. A pattern so powerful, so consistently brutal, that every single major empire that has ever tried to conquer the Middle East has eventually collapsed. Not some of them, not most of them, all of them. Think about it. The ancient Greeks, the mighty Roman Empire, the colossal British Empire, even the Soviet Union. Every single one of them. They came in strong, they made their moves, and then they fell apart. Today, we're not just going to list these empires. We're going to dive deep into why this happens. We're going to find the one terrifying common denominator they all shared and what it means for today. Why this matters today? Now, you might be thinking, that's old news, ancient history. But here's the thing. This isn't just dusty old textbooks. This pattern, this historical curse, is playing out right now in our headlines. U.S. forces are deployed across the region, tensions are at an all-time high, and every single news report you read about the Middle East is an echo of events that have happened countless times before. It's like watching a movie you've already seen, but the actors are different. The stakes are just as high, and frankly, nobody in power seems to have bothered reading the history books. So, the central question we need to answer today is this. What is it about this specific region, this stretch of land, that consistently breaks every superpower that dares to touch it? The Greeks, Alexander's shattered dream. Let's rewind over 2 millennia to one of the greatest military minds who ever lived, Alexander the Great. He was young, brilliant, and by 330 BC, he had conquered the vast Persian Empire, a feat no one thought possible. He marched his armies across what we now call the Middle East, all the way to India. It seemed like the start of an eternal empire. But here's the twist. Alexander died suddenly, mysteriously, at just 32 years old. And what happened next? His supposedly eternal empire shattered. His top generals, the very men who had helped him conquer the world, immediately turned on each other. They fought a brutal series of wars, known as the Diadochi Wars, tearing the empire into fragments. So, the lesson from the Greeks? Military victory, no matter how spectacular, doesn't automatically translate into lasting power in this region. The very act of conquering it seemed to carry a self-destructive seed. The Romans, a bottomless pit. Now, let's fast forward to the Roman Empire, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the ancient world. They didn't just dabble in the Middle East. They spent nearly 300 years fighting there. We're talking about the Parthian Wars, the Jewish-Roman Wars, the endless skirmishes with the Sassanid Persians. It was a bottomless pit of resources, manpower, and political capital. The cost was immense. We had 3 Roman emperors killed in action or captured by Middle Eastern enemies. The Roman treasury was constantly drained, and their legendary legions, usually unstoppable, were stretched to their absolute breaking point. Remember Crassus? The richest man in Rome, who thought he could buy his way to military glory in the Parthian desert. He died a humiliating death, and his head was supposedly sent back to the Parthian king as a grotesque trophy. The Middle East wasn't just a place of conflict for Rome. It was a slow, agonizing drain on their entire system. The British, the sunset of an empire, jumped to the 20th century. After World War I, the British Empire, at its absolute peak, drew lines on maps and carved up the Middle East, taking control of vast territories like Iraq, Palestine, and Persia. They thought they could manage it. The result? Endless insurgencies, uprisings, and wars. Britain fought 3 wars in Iraq alone in the first half of the 20th century. The cost of maintaining control, of constantly fighting local resistance, became unbearable. The nail in the coffin came in 1956 with the Suez Crisis. Britain tried to reclaim control of the Suez Canal, and the world, especially the United States, told them no. That was the moment the sun finally set on the British Empire. Its attempts to control the Middle East played a huge role in its undoing, exhausting its resources and eroding its international standing. The Soviets, the final straw, and then, of course, there's the Soviet Union. In 1979, they invaded Afghanistan, a country often referred to as the graveyard of empires. It was their Vietnam, a decade-long quagmire that bled them dry. 15,000 Soviet soldiers died, but the real cost was economic and political. The war in Afghanistan was a massive drain on an already struggling Soviet economy. It demoralized the military and ignited widespread dissent at home. The Soviet Union officially collapsed just 2 years after its humiliating withdrawal from Afghanistan. Many historians draw a direct line from that defeat in the Middle East to the ultimate dissolution of the Soviet Empire. It was, quite literally, the final straw. It's not about superiority, so what is the terrifying common denominator? What's the one thing all these empires had in common? It's this: they all entered the Middle East with a purely military objective, or a colonial one, or an economic one. But they had no answer for the deep, complex tapestry of local cultures, religions, and tribal loyalties underneath. They saw land to be conquered, resources to be extracted, or enemies to be defeated. They failed to see a civilization with thousands of years of history, identity, and an unwavering resistance to foreign domination. This isn't about one army being better than another. It's a structural trap. A historian's term, the graveyard of empires, was originally coined for Afghanistan, but it honestly applies to the entire region. This isn't about terrain or tactics. It's about a fundamental clash of worldviews that military force simply cannot solve. The echoes of history. Now, let's bring it back to today. America has been deeply involved in this same region for over 2 decades, since 2001. We've seen hundreds of thousands of lives lost, trillions of dollars spent. The pattern is undeniable. The historical precedents are screaming at us. The question isn't whether this pattern applies to America. It's how far along the timeline we already are. Are we in the Greek phase, where the empire is starting to fracture from within? Are we in the Roman phase, where the endless drain is becoming unsustainable? Or are we closer to the British or Soviet final acts? Knowledge is power. Understanding this history isn't about doomsaying. It's about being informed. It's about recognizing that the news you see on your screen today is not new. It's part of a much larger, much older story. And ignoring that story, ignoring those patterns, makes us vulnerable to repeating the same catastrophic mistakes. History doesn't always repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And when it rhymes this loudly, we should probably listen. If this deep dive into historical patterns made you think, if it made you look at today's headlines a little differently, then you need to subscribe to Histovra. Because next, I'm breaking down the exact Roman collapse timeline, step by step, and you won't believe how closely America is following it. Don't miss it. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to be notified.